Liberal National Senator Barnaby Joyce has actually just started a media conference on that issue. Let's go live to Canberra now.
We need a better outcome than the one we get when I ring up 3 ministers in the morning. After ringing up 3 ministers or 3 ministers' offices, I get no, no and no. What people were so concerned about this plan is they've made their contributions to it, but they don't seem to have been acknowledged. Now, I'm quite prepared to sit down with Minister Burke and to try to work towards an outcome. But he's got to do a better job than what we've got here. And this is just turning itself into yet another, cluster of the Labor parties. And now we've got a number where I couldn't believe it. I listened to Mr. Burke. He had his number. It's 2,750. Then he told us about the adjustable SDL, so the number could go up or down. And then he told us he didn't agree with the number. So he's got a number that can go up, go down, and either way it goes, he's not happy with it. And it's his own number. So please don't ask me what my position is on Mr. Burke's position, because Mr. Burke doesn't have a position on Mr. Burke's position. We have got to make sure that we take into account the socio and economic effects in a real way, that we can actually go to the plan and see what is happening to the lives of people and how they've been affected. Now, a lot of the analysis in the plan is an analysis that I'm sure that you people wouldn't live under. For instance, they use the idea that any money that is used to buy water licences stays in the district. And I've given you a classic example already of how on the Twynham purchase, not only did it not stay in the district, not only did it not stay in the state, it didn't even stay in the country. It's now being applied to the development of an irrigation project in the Sudan, on the Nile. I don't know how that's going to help the people of Coloranabry. Maybe they'll get a sense of bonhomie, knowing that the good people of the Sudan are now using the money from the water that was in their district to develop an irrigation project in Northern Africa. If we expand beyond that, they talk about the perfect mobility of labour. Well, this is a pretty cruel way to approach people when you say to them, well, don't worry, if you lose your job, you can just move up to the Kimberleys and get a job there. How would the Fourth Estate feel if I said, well, you might lose your job in the media, but it's all right because there's one for you in Buenos Aires and you can just move over there. People want to stay rather proximate to where the mortgage on their house is. This is their investment. This is the economic rug which sits underneath them, and these rights need to be respected. There is an extremely important element of life in the Murray-Darling Basin. In fact, there's around 2.1 million of them, and they're called people. And they need to be respected, and their lives need to be respected. And this sort of blasé approach that, 1,600 jobs will be lost, but don't worry about it. Well, I think everybody's going to be worried about that, especially in the current economic climate. And then to say, oh, but don't worry, it'll only happen at 200 jobs a year. Well, how would you feel about that in your local town? How would you feel about that in your local city? You can't do that to people. And as a nation, we've got to be very mindful of the fact that we need to be doing everything in our power to make money, to secure the price of food, to make sure that the people who are pushing shopping trolleys in Blackdown, in Ipswich, in Tamworth, in Brisbane, to make sure that these people don't wear bad management in the cost of their staples or their everyday staples, which is their food. We are talking about something here that produces 40% of the food for Australia, so we have to be extremely careful how we deal with it. And if we deal with this in the same manner which they've dealt with, selecting a Speaker of the House, or ceiling insulation, or the increase in debt, then we will create massive problems for ourselves. Now, I've heard Senator Hanson-Young come out and say that she didn't agree, and she came out and gave another press conference saying that she's not prepared to negotiate and she doesn't agree. Well, that's great. So Senator Hanson-Young no longer really has a position at the table, and that's fair enough. I'm prepared, though, to sit down with Minister Burke and see if we can try and get this to some position where parties agree. But we've got a lot of ground to cover, because at this point in time we haven't got one state on board with it, and that just goes to show you what an atrocious job has been done.
What is it going to take to get the coalition on board? What sort of specific changes are you wanting to start discussing with Tony Burke when you do sit down for meetings this week? Well,
to start with, Lauren, when you talk about getting the coalition on board, getting on this is how absurd it is. The Labor Party's not even on board with their own position. They've now got a position, Lauren, where the number at 2,750 can go up, it can go down, and either way that Mr. Burke doesn't agree with it. That was in his press conference. It was like Python trying to listen to him. Now, I'm hoping that what we do is we start dealing with some of those socio-economic issues, making sure that we can actually see those results in the plan. And Lauren, we can get to a position where we get sign-off. It's to say, though, well, the states will never agree. That's not right. We've had that in the National Water Initiative. We just have that in the Living Murray Agreement. In fact, the only way you'll get sign-off is if you do engage and get agreement. And we can do it. We've done it before in the past. And I think it's proper to remind people that before this Murray-Darling Basin plan program went forward, we'd already got back 969 gigs through the Living Murray Agreement and the National Water Initiative. And that was done without the fight, even a semblance of the fight and the lunacy that we've got here at the moment.
In terms of the states, I mean, Victoria said today that the plan that has just been released is death warrant for their agricultural communities. South Australia is still saying anything in this vicinity is untenable. Do you think it's realistic that, South Australia and Victoria particularly are going to be able to sign up to the same document?
Well, Premier Weatherall was never really at the table. I mean, he decided that he was never going to be part of it right from the word go. He came out with a proposition that was just untenable. But the other states were at the table. We were going down a path, but it's been blown out of the water today because as their discussions with me, they feel that a lot of their input, far from not even being in the plan, they wonder if it was even read.
So if Victoria and New South Wales come back or through this next 6-week process there is a revised document again that both of those states would support, would the coalition be a lot more likely to allow that to go through Parliament if Victoria and New South Wales tick off?
Well, Lauren, we've always said we'll support a good plan, and the premise of a good plan is that key stakeholders agree to it. Now, we haven't got, I don't know whether you can nominate one stakeholder at the moment who agrees with this. So that would have to tick the box of a bad plan.
Sarah Hanson-Young offered up modelling the 4,000 gigs as a sort of starting point for negotiations. Do you have at least a similar concrete starting point for talks with Tony Burke?
Yeah, if you're going to start going down the path of Sarah Hanson-Young's, you've got no starting point with me. That would be economic destitution. Obviously, she seems to have no concern about the economic lives of the people in the basin. It doesn't really apply to her. To be honest, she doesn't even live in the basin. Her view really, and it's fair enough. She has a strong concentration on the mouth of the Murray. I grant her that. But her concentration on the lives and the economic fabric of the 2.1 million people who actually live in the basin is not apparent. So 4,000, I can tell you right from the start, would be an absolute disaster without, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in water infrastructure, money we just don't have.
Sure, but she can name something concrete that she wants from Tony Burke when she walks into his office. Can you do something?
Well, I can't because Minister Burke can't even name something concrete. I listened to Minister Burke, I listened closely to him, and he said 2,750, but the number can go up or the number could go down. And whether it goes up or down, he still doesn't agree to it. He doesn't agree to his own number. So it makes it very hard when somebody says, "Do you agree with my position?" And you say to Minister Burke, you have every position. You have more positions than the Kama Sutra. You are everywhere on this issue.
Are the coalition divided on this, though, Senator?
I haven't heard any other position except the one I'm enunciating, so I'm pretty happy that we have a locked-in position. I've always stated that we would stay at the table and negotiate to an outcome, and that's what I'm still intending to do. And it's the sooner Minister Burke realises that where is final hope. I mean, Minister Burke, if he actually made this thing work, he might be the shining orb of light in the Labor Party, the person who could actually get something together. But if he doesn't, he's just going to be another in the retinue of clusters.
Do you
It seems
believe
reasonably
that
clear.
There was one out the back, so I'll get that.
I was going to say, you're criticising Tony Burke for not having a concrete figure to stick to, but you're the shadow minister. The coalition wants to go to an election ASAP. Apparently you've got your policies ready to go. So what is your figure? What's your number?
Well, when you actually talk about a figure, it's like talking about someone's weight. What's your appropriate weight? It's not what your weight is, it's what your health is. It's not what the figure is, it's what the outcomes are. It's what the outcomes are and how they associate back to the towns where they come from. Still at this point in time, Ashley, we don't know exactly where the water's coming from. We don't know exactly where the water's going to. We don't know how it's going to get there. We don't actually know how much water is required at these 2,442 assets. and we don't actually, in some instances, know why we need to do it. So that is a pretty peculiar place to start negotiations from. What we've done is a very simple approach to an argument is to have a fascination with the number. And as I said, and no one seems to get it because they don't get the metaphor, it's like a hitchhiker's guide to the Murray-Darling Basin, where instead of the magic number being whatever it was, 42, it's now 2,750.
What do you think of the public consultation period? We've just gone 20 weeks and places like Griffith said a pretty clear message, but this plan doesn't seem to have changed too much.
Well, they're furious because, and I know they're furious, and we're getting feedback because people have gone there and nothing's happened. You know, they've arrived at the church for the marriage, and the bells are ringing and everyone's dressed up, but the groom's walked out without the bride, and it's all exactly where it's left. There's nothing that's happened. There's nothing in the plan that reflects the outcome. And there are so many things such as environmental works and measures in stream to get a better utilisation of water, so that you don't need to take so much out, but you do get the environmental benefit. These things have not been properly delved into in a concrete and substantial way. We don't really know exactly, and we hear once more from Minister Burke about the problems, but we haven't really heard about the solutions.
Do you support the authorities?
You are going to end up with a figure. Sorry, look, you are going to end up with a figure one way or the other. Tony Burke, it seems reasonably clear to me, accepts the 2750 as a figure, with the option of it being varied from 2015 up or down, depending on what the outcomes are at the time. I mean, Tony Burke does have a fairly clear position on that. Is that a deal breaker for you? Are you prepared to accept that?
Well, I don't think, without having to differ, I don't think he has got a figure. I've read it, and he talks in one part of the paper about how the figure would go to 3,200 gigs or down to 2,400 gigs. Now, they're vastly different figures. That is a huge margin of error. I don't think that's beyond a reasonable statistical error, and people have got to make their plans around this. So I don't think he has got a figure, and whatever he's got, and it's his own figure, he's not prepared to take it to the chamber. He's said himself that he's not happy with his own outcome.
So it should be less flexible?
Do you think
it should be more deliberate in exactly what the outcome is, especially in socio-economic terms, especially in the towns of Deniliquin, in Shepparton, in Mildura, in my town, St George, Dirranbandi, Coleambally, Berry. We've got to know exactly what is going to be the effect on the town, because we keep talking about irrigation and agriculture, and that's very important. But we must also remember the thing called the house owner and the mortgage holder in these towns. These people, after working their life, and maybe it was in a tyre business or maybe it was in the local grocery store, and they've paid off a house, they have an expectation, they have a right that we protect the value in their house. We can't just say, oh, we'll also throw you on this sort of funeral pyre of the ministers and of Sarah Hanson-Young's. We've got to actually try and protect the value in those assets because there is no compensation package for them.
So is it coalition policy then not to have the authority have the additional flexibility to change that SDL?
Well, let's make sure that we get the state ministers on board, and what I'm going to do is make sure that I get to a position with state ministers that they are happy with an outcome, and if they can work that into their position of comfort, then there's a chance of that going forward. But if state ministers are not, and the state ministers are very parochial about state rights and the Commonwealth's role, then obviously there's no point going forward with something that nobody agrees with. We've got to make sure that we get back to the culture of the National Water Initiative and the Living Murray Agreement, where we actually can get people on the same page, because that is the only way you'll ever get an outcome.
So you don't actually have a position though on whether it's a good idea for the authority to have that leeway?
As I've said right at the start, I can't have a position when the minister himself has got every position under the sun.
Okay, so that was the opposition water spokesman Barnaby Joyce live from Parliament House in Canberra, talking about the release today of the latest draft of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority plan. He says thousands of jobs would be lost if the existing plan went ahead. He also says not one state is on board with this as it is now, and that it's been poorly managed by the government. Earlier we heard from the Minister, Tony Burke. He says this plan is a step in the right direction, but he wouldn't sign off on it in its current form, but he wants to get something signed off on by the end of this year.